Hello again, folks, and welcome back to RPMbassy with John and Mark. We are counting down our top 20 vinyl records of all time, and we are at the number one spot. So this is the top record of all time according to us. I'm going to start us off. So, in my opinion, this is the best debut album of all time. And I get that that's probably going to be controversial for a lot of people, but it's Hybrid Theory by Linkin Park. And I know they get a lot of flack, you know, nu metal in general, which realistically this album kind of fits right into that nu metal genre. A lot of people think it's a bit cringe, a lot of people think it's a bit too edgy and for angsty teenagers, but you know what, this album, start to finish, is fucking excellent. There isn't a duff track on it. It sounds amazing for a debut as well. For the age that I was when I first heard this was kind of what got me into heavy music and got me into music in general. I think Hybrid Theory on CD was probably, I wouldn't be surprised if it was probably one of my first own albums of all time, as in I bought it with my own money. I was like, that's an album for me.
There's a bit of similarity between my number one as well.
And that kind of like makes it special in its own right, because it was like when I was getting to the point where I could understand what I actually wanted for myself, rather than listening to other people's music and being told like, oh yeah, you can listen to this, you can listen to that, oh here's this thing. It was like, no, I actually want to pick this. I personally think their early career was like the strongest. They started off as a band called Zero, had a different vocalist. He left. Chester Bennington came in to become the frontman. They then changed their name to Hybrid Theory, which obviously is now the album name rather than the band name. Had some legal issues with a band called Hybrid from Wales, and then changed their name to Linkin Park, and then took that name and made it the album title instead. The etymology, the reason behind that name was Hybrid Theory, as in it's a hybrid of music theories, because they're coming at it from sort of like a rap and hip hop perspective and a metal and rock perspective and mixing it together, which, you know, wasn't a new thing at that point. They even acknowledge it themselves. There's a B-side where they talk about how rock and rap have collaborated for years. I mean, you know, you've got stuff like Public Enemy and Anthrax and stuff like that. Yeah. They did tracks together and things. And that was, you know, like a decade, if not longer, before this album even came out. Mixed by Andy Wallace. You know, I mean, he's had his name on all kinds of different productions. Rain in Blood, I think, was a project or an album he worked on. Did stuff with Nirvana, with so many different bands throughout the ages. And yeah, really shines on this. Like, this album sounds excellent. Big standout for me, the two sort of parts that really, really bring it to life. Brad Delson, the guitarist, his guitar work, lots of like harmonics and stuff like that, which at the time when like nu metal, you know, this was kind of at the peak of nu metal, a lot of bands were just doing like boring chords. And like, yeah, they were heavy bands and they made some really catchy stuff and it worked with a rap focus on top of it. But you know, this is actually a little bit more thought out. And then you've got Joe Hahn, the turntablist, doing some really, really cool things in terms of layering. You know, he's not just there to do disc scratches, he's there doing lots of sample launching and things like that. And probably the biggest track, Numb, which was on the album after this, I mean, that's kind of all him, really. Like that, he's sort of the focal part of that song, instrumentally at the very least. Yeah, I mean, other than that, you've got tracks like Paper Cut, One Step Closer, two huge hits for them at the time. In the End, which I think everybody knows that song. That's kind of a meme in and of itself. But everything on here is amazing. Going back to Joe Hahn as well, Cure for the Itch, which is the second to last track on the album. That's just all him. It's just like a turntable session or like a production session, really. The last half of that is this beat with like it's like an orchestral backing. I don't think it's real strings. I think it's all synthesized, but that sounds excellent. Like, I could listen to that for like 10 hours on a loop. If there was a way that they could get that beat and have that in like a locked groove at the end of the album, I'd be so over the moon with that.
Locked groove is something I've never heard of for quite a while.
But yeah, in terms of the legacy that this album left as well, they became like superstars overnight in terms of like the nu metal genre. They had a remix album release called Reanimation, which is excellent as well, and lots of collaborations from artists that came before them. Some of the tracks on the Reanimation album, some of the remixes I do kind of prefer to this, but as a cohesive work, just to sit down and listen to the whole thing in one go, like this is absolutely killer.
So the remix, is it just reinterpretations or actual people remixing this?
Oh yeah, some of them are really heavy remixes.
Right.
So like there's actually a track that doesn't feature on the main track list of this, but was kind of on their special editions and stuff like that, called My December, which is just like a piano thing on the initial release, and then in the reanimation version, it's become this like ambient trip hoppy kind of song, to the point actually where I can't remember her name, the initial vocalist who was in Sneaker Pimps, she performs some vocals on the remix of that song. And then obviously after that they had the album Meteora, which is equally as good, I would say, just harder to get hold of.
What, vinyl in general?
In vinyl, and it doesn't have the same thing that pushes over the edge, in that this is a debut album. This is the first album that a band have released as like a full project, and it's this well put together, this complete. You know, as I said, not a bad track on it.
I mean, it's a band, to be quite honest, I think they were quite late for me. What year was that?
2000, I believe.
Oh yeah, so I was off doing other things at that particular time, doing a lot of travelling. So they were a bit late for me. I haven't really sat and listened to any kind of Linkin Park, but I know that people do talk. I know who they are. People have been talking about them, but I've just never sat down and kind of listened to them. So maybe I will with that album.
Yeah, definitely worth it. As I said, fantastic album, great start to finish, and yeah, it's a part of me growing up. So like, regardless of it, how good it would or wouldn't have been, because it was when I was growing up, like it's always going to be there. Is
that the album you take to a desert island with you?
Very possibly could be, yeah.
What else could it be?
Oh, I mean, their second album could potentially be on there. I think if I was picking a desert island album, it would be something from a few years ago. Something that I've got memories of. There's great stuff coming out all the time. The Periphery stuff and things like that. Fantastic albums. But the memories I have associated with them are, this is really good music. I have more memories associated with this that aren't just about the music, which kind of makes the album more important, in my opinion.
Well, the memories on my number one, go way back before you were even born, because I'm really old. So my number one, and this is a no-brainer really, to be quite honest, because this is the album that influenced me, that got me into music. Because before, when this album came out, I was really quite young when this came out. This album came out in 1977. And it is Nevermind the Bollocks by the Sex Pistols. So before this album came out, so I would have been maybe 8.5. Very different back then, obviously, because we didn't have things like computer games. So we were all into like superheroes and all sorts. But I remember they were on TV, the Sex Pistols. And I think there was a lot of stuff about this album in the newspapers and everything that we were seeing. So when we came into school the next day, everyone was talking about it. I think they'd just been on Top of the Pops or something like that. I can't remember exactly what was going on, but we knew this was that. And the fact that it said the word bollocks, even at 8.5, I knew what the word bollocks was, and I knew it was like used as a swear word at 8.5. But I can't remember how I got hold of this album, but I do remember when I got it, it came in a brown paper bag. And then reading about it later on, a lot of the stores had to sell it in a brown paper bag, but I can't remember where I got it from. I can't remember. It was a friend's father who was a bit more kind of liberal, bought it for us. But I remember I had to hide this album. And I used to hide it at his house, and we used to go and listen to it. So I was 8.5. This like crazy thing, 8.5 was like really into this. But one of the reasons why we really liked this, it had a swear word in it. And one of my favourite tracks on this album is Bodies, where the music just drops out and then John Lydon comes back and goes, fuck this and fuck that. And that was a bit we used to love because it was all swear words. But this album, as far as I'm concerned, changed the face of music. This inspired a lot of bands to pick up a guitar, pick up their drums, write some songs. So there's such an influential album, and even now I listen to it, and again, as you talk about memories, just bring me straight back to 8.5, 9, 10. I listened to it right through, even listen to it now. So this came out in 1977, and basically the whole album was written with the whole band, John Lydon, Glenn Matlock, the rest of them. I do know who they are, but I'm not going to go through the names. But Glenn Matlock left when they started recording this album. So even though he's still credited on all these tracks, bar 2, and he doesn't play, I think he plays on one of the tracks, which was Anarchy in the UK. That's the only track that he actually plays on. The other 2 tracks were credited to Sid Vicious, because obviously he joined, played bass on 2 of the tracks. The 2 that he played on was Bodies and Holidays in the Sun. But even though he played on their tracks, Steve Jones still played the bass on their tracks, and Sid Vicious' kind of bass was like lowered in the mix because he wasn't a very good bass player, but he had the look. He was like the pin-up of the Sex Pistols. The artwork was done by Jamie Reed, so literally just cut and paste. And even the same with all the song titles on the back. And to me, this is just like incredible. I love the colours. Even if you look at the RPM logo, it's these colours. Yeah, and there's a reason why this inspirational album. So when the album first came out, it was produced by two producers, Chris Thomas and Bill Price, and it's recorded in a couple of studios, and both the producers, so what they did, they collated all the different versions. So all of these, I don't think they know what studio they were recorded in, but they were recorded by a couple of different producers. So maybe Holiday in the Sun by one producer, Anarchy in the UK is by another producer, but they're both credited as being the producers of the whole album because it just collated all of this. When this did come out, another album came out called Spunk, and basically it is supposed to be the true recordings of Anarchy, and you know, Pretty Vacant and all of that, and came out as a bootleg album. And there is talk that it was Malcolm McLaren actually did it, because this got signed to Virgin and they got signed to Warner, I believe, in America, Barclays in France, and France were going to release it before Virgin. So Virgin rushed released it, and there was a couple of titles on there that weren't actually credited on the sleeve. So if you ever had them copies, worth a lot of money. So the original one came out with the Dayglow yellow with the pink writing, but in Canada and America, I think it came out with the pink and the green. There's been reissues over the years, but I think it's an album that hasn't been... It should be a lot more done with it. It's such an iconic album. You know, the only thing they've done recently, this came out on Record Store Day, was a picture disc, which is great. But, you know, this is definitely an album. If you're into music, if you call yourself a music lover or vinyl collector, you should have had a listen to this album. You know, a lot of artists, even things like Noel Gallagher, his all-time hit is this. This inspired him to write. A lot of artists out there, this inspired them to write and record music. And it's the only album recorded by the Sex Pistols. Bear in mind, they're only together for 1 year. And obviously got the singles, Anarchy in the UK, Holidays in the Sun, God Save the Queen, we know all of them. But this is the only album ever recorded by the Sex Pistols. You've also got things like The Rock and Roll Swindle, Flogging a Dead Horse, but they're just all little add-ons. This is the definitive Sex Pistols lineup. And it's Never Mind the Bollocks by the Sex Pistols. Check it out. And that is our top 20. Love to know your thoughts. What do you think about our top 20? Any duffs that you would call any duffs? Any bonuses? Any kind of tracks that, you know, albums that you think, yeah, I'm definitely going to check that out. For any future lists, if you just put a comment down the bottom, that would be really handy. And please kind of subscribe if you can. But if not, just keep checking out our videos. We're coming out with great content. We'll have some guests at some point. Not the Sex Pistols, but we'll definitely have some sex. But anyway, look forward to you in another video, and that's my and Marc's top 20 all-time records. Thank you very much.